expose for its front page. It depicted the plant in Postville as a, quote, jungle, following a well-known novel by that title, in which they said, quote, impoverished humans do the factory's dirty work. The theme of the story was simply and entirely false. Although the reporter had no trouble finding me when he wrote other stories for the forward, he did not bother to call me before rushing into print with this defamatory story. A few interested readers traveled to Postville to check on the forward's reporting. Rabbi Asher Zeilengold and Dr. Carlos Carbonera wrote detailed eyewitness reports directly contradicting what the forward had said. In fact, almost 4 years later, in the federal court hearings on Shalom Rubashkin's sentence, both of them testified under oath in a federal court that the forward's reports of mistreatment at agri-processors were untrue. Very few of Acheinu B'nai Yisrael bothered to hear them. Our Jewish brethren were ready to believe the worst, and many rushed to condemn agri-processors and the Rubashkins in sanctimonious pronouncements. Kashrus of an animal slaughtered to be eaten was no longer to be determined by the halakha of Maseches Chulin or Yoredeya or the Tvul Shor. Even the approval of a mumcha on Tzar Baalei Chayim, such as the kind to animal expert Dr. Temple Grandin, was not sufficient. Now kashrus was going to be determined by a rabbinical trade commission organized by conservative rabbis who should be trusted to affix a decency plumba on every truly kosher side of beef. United States government officials took note of the slanders, and they accepted them as true. A federal immigration and customs enforcement agent said in an affidavit he filed with a federal judge on May 9, 2008, that there were, quote, numerous reports in the media regarding workers' mistreatment at agri-processors, including a 2000 article called In Iowa Meat Plant, Kosher Jungle Breeds Fear, Injury, Short Pay, published in the newspaper, The Forward. I can tell you this is the first time in my 40 years as a white-collar criminal defense lawyer that I saw a federal affidavit for a search warrant rely on a newspaper story. The affidavit went on with this unprecedented reliance on false lashon hara. It said, quote, following the article in the forward, the Washington Post reported on July 2, 2007, that some conservative rabbis who toured the plant were shocked. Quote, this is the conservative rabbis. We found people arriving from the mountainsides of Guatemala on a Tuesday and being on the front of the production line on Wednesday. We saw people who could barely read Spanish getting training in English and having no idea what was said to them. Well, the conservative rabbis were surely as, quote, shocked to see recently arrived Guatemalans at agri-processors as, and here I will use a simile that will be much more meaningful to the conservative rabbis than to the island that's here this evening. They were shocked as much as Claude Rains was shocked in Casablanca to find that there was gambling in Rick's Cafe. The law making it a crime to employ undocumented aliens was enacted by Congress in 1986, and it remained a dead letter for 20 years, while everyone knew that meatpacking plants and other employers who could use brawny workers who could not speak English were hiring illegal aliens. And the shock surely extended to the prosecutors in Iowa, all of whom, after all, are honorable men. The federal affidavit was a virtual cesspool of malicious, unfounded rumors, including the false allegation that there was a laboratory for producing narcotics, a narcotic I can barely pronounce, methamphetamine, was located at the plant, and that some employees carried weapons that were traded for drugs or sold. The federal prosecutors then armed 600 men, 50% more than Asifa inducted to meet Yaakov, to raid agri-processors and to haul away any illegal aliens on the premises. Even a Black Hawk helicopter was requisitioned for this quasi-military assault. Sholem Rubashkin saw that a raid was imminent, and at the suggestion of the American Meat Institute, he hired a lawyer with Baker & McKenzie, one of the world's largest law firms, who had represented Swift & Company, America's largest meat packer, when it, Swift, was threatened with a similar raid on a plant in Texas. The lawyer had negotiated with federal prosecutors in Texas that instead of besieging the meatpacking plant with a brigade of armed troops, the immigration officials should be granted peaceful access to the plant and to its employment records. They were then able to arrest illegal aliens employed at the plant. Please do the same for agri-processors, which is the nation's leading kosher meatpacking plant, as you did for Swift, said lawyer Robert Kent in a letter which he delivered to the federal prosecutors on May 9, 2008. And he added, if you like, check with the prosecutors in Texas about me and my experience. The federal prosecutors in Iowa promptly rejected that sensible and peaceful request, and they invaded agri-processors on Black Monday, May 12, 2008. That assault not only did enormous physical damage, but it led directly to the bankruptcy of the business. The plant closed for a while, the cash flow dried up, and customers chose not to pay. Now, could the prosecutors, who are, of course, honorable men, have been seeking national publicity when they insisted on raiding agri-processors rather than finding illegal alien employees in a more civilized procedure? Did they possibly anticipate that the New York Times would carry a story on the front page of its national report section in which it said, quote, in the biggest workplace immigration raid this year, federal agents swept into a kosher meat plant on Monday in Postal, Iowa, and arrested more than 300 workers? Could they have anticipated that the incendiary affidavit which they disclosed would be repeated in the Times, and that the story regarding the methamphetamine lab and the trade in guns would be printed in the Times? Well, the sub-headline in the Times read, in Iowa, agents raid the largest kosher packing house. Now, the federal prosecutors would deny that they were seeking publicity by raiding America's largest kosher packing house. And, of course, the federal prosecutors are honorable men. The prosecutors took their time in bringing charges against Sholem Rubashkin. He hired lawyers. He remained in Postville, determined to prove to a fairly selected, impartial American jury that he was not guilty of knowingly hiring illegal aliens, and that agri-processors had screened applicants and turned away those that could not document that they were in the United States legally. Indeed, the very same affidavit that was chock full of slanderous false statements and that quoted the forward stories had